Good afternoon. My name is Nadine and I am a children's counselling manager at Spurgeons, and I've had that role for about 8 months. And apart from that, I'm also a PhD student down at King's College in London, and I'm just about to go into my second year. The reason why I wanted to say that as well is that up until about 8 years ago, I'd actually only just got my GCSE results. So I was a very average student. I didn't pass my GCSE in maths, and I didn't go on after that. Living in quite a deprived area of the country, we didn't really have opportunities. So over the past 8 years, I became really passionate about autism research and trauma because of my role as a counsellor, and I've moved up to become a PhD student. And so I think I wanted to say that to you because no matter what how your child does in a couple of weeks' time, there's always possibilities to improve and move forward, and it might take them a little bit longer. I'm now 40. So it's taken me a while to get there, but I have got there. So, it's never over just because of exam results. And as I say, I was one of them who was really disappointed the day that I got my GCSE results. But looking back, I wouldn't change it because it's got me to where I am now. I'm going to pass you over to Nicola so she can introduce herself. Thanks.
And so, yeah, I'm Nicola. I've been working for Spurgeons as a family support worker for the last 8 years. It wasn't originally what I intended to do. I actually did pass all my O-levels as I was expected to, which was great. Went on to do some A-levels, but I actually ended up leaving school, not knowing what to do. And I worked initially for a job in my dad's newsagent, and then I went into the bank because it was a secure job, but I wasn't really happy in that job. And then my mum happened to see an advert for a microbiologist for a water company, and I'd always been interested in science, so I went along to that, and I then completed my ONC and HNC in college. So yeah, microbiologist to family support workers, quite a big journey. But actually what happened to me was I had a repetitive strain injury, was unable to continue that job as a microbiologist. But I then went on to have 4 children, some of which are neurodiverse as well. Interesting at times, and circumstances led me to Spurgeons, and I actually would say it's the best job in the world that I've got now, and I'm very happy. So as Nadine said, you don't always know how life is going to go, but there is always hope, no matter what those results are. So Mark mentioned polls earlier, so I'd just like to go on to our first poll, which is about results day. Could you just tell us, please, what word immediately comes to mind when you think about your child receiving their results? And I'm just going to pass you on to Nadine now to talk about sort of how we feel might affect.
So there's something called projection, and it's something that human beings naturally do without even thinking about it. And it's when we project our worries and our fears. So what I want you to do is I want you to have a think about whether the words that you've just used, nerves, hopeful, anxious, proud, which is a lovely word, whether or not they are to do with you and how you did with your exam results. It might not be, but a lot of the time it can be. So say, for example, you were really, really nervous in the run up to your exam results. You've got an expectation that's how your child might feel. Or, if you did really well, you might feel more hopeful. So projection is something really important to think about, okay? Because actually, the way your child is acting right now, whether it's through like nerves and anxiety, it could be because you're passing those feelings on. Okay. So if you're feeling anxious or nervous because of past experiences to do with exams, you might be subconsciously, so not on purpose, passing them forward. So be aware of that. Okay. So I want you just to have a little think about how that might be affecting, your current relationship with your child and whether or not that could be the case. It might not be, but sometimes I've got a child who's about to go into her GCSE years, and I'm really nervous, and I know that probably 75% of that is because of how I did with my GCSE. So have a think. It can be really useful, okay? So what we're going to do next is think about your past experiences with like a mini quiz, and we're going to go through each one and try and discover whether or not some projection can be there. So question number one is, how pleased were you with your exam results? The next question is, how much did you feel supported by your parents? How closely have you followed the career path you expected to? Okay, how happy are you in your current job? And one more question, which is, looking back, how important was it that you got the grades you did? So thinking about where you are today, how important was it? Just reflect on that in a couple of weeks' time moving forward. You know, if your child doesn't get the grades that were expected, you know, they will be okay. You know, with support, you guys are supportive parents. You're here today to offer them as much support as possible. That is literally all they need. Okay. So, you know, they will be okay. And so just even tell them about this, you know, it would be interesting for them to know. So we're just going to move on to a really nice inspirational quote, okay, from Fred Durst, okay, of Limp Bizkit. And it says, when I look back on my knee-jerk reactions now, I realise I should have just taken a breath. It's just to sit and think about and reflect on, because I think it's such a lovely, lovely quote. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go on to a section called therapeutic parenting, and it's thinking about how we can support our children, not just in this actually, and we can use this all of the time. Okay, so the therapeutic parenting technique that I use at home, but also offer in my therapy room, is called PACE, okay? And it stands for playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. Now, I'm going to put this into our exam results kind of, you know, thought. When your child is acting a little bit grumpier than usual, okay, we have to have an element of playfulness in our voice. If we act serious every single time our child wants to try and rip our heads off for saying, would you like a cup of tea? Okay, it's going to be quite a hostile environment. So be quite playful, okay? Like, you know, I don't know, just have a jovial voice about yourself, okay? Remember, you know, when I say playfulness, you know, board games, going for walks, having fun with your young people, okay? It's not really a fun time, let's face it, and the next 2 weeks is going to be awful. But how can you do it so your house is just a little bit lighter and a little bit happier? So playfulness is really, really important, okay? And your child is not going to come forward and be playful, okay? So you're gonna have to direct that one, okay? Acceptance, and this word means many different things, okay? So first of all, acceptance in the grade that they get, okay? If they don't do quite as well as what you and they hoped, accept it, okay? Have a little look and see what you can do, okay? Be productive, okay? Accepting their behavior at the moment, okay? Accepting the fact that they may be a little bit more moody than usual, accepting your own behavior as well, okay? And not using it against them, okay? Not grounding them for the smallest thing, okay? Just accept that this is a difficult time. And also accepting their personality. Okay, you might want them to go to university, they might not want to, okay? You might want them to go to sixth form, they want an apprenticeship, accept it. It's their personality, it's their future and it's their life. Even though it's really difficult, we've got to accept it, okay? Curiosity, really, really important, okay? So if your child is a little bit moodier than usual, okay, just say, Jack, that's not like you. What's going on for you? You know, tell me what's going on. Okay, so be curious. Instead of stop with the tone, stop with the attitude, you know, turn it back on them. You know, what's going on? Let's have a chat about it instead. Okay. And that's all, it's always nice. And it's less challenging for them. And then most importantly, empathy. Okay, let's put ourselves in their shoes. We've been there. Okay, we've done it. Okay, it's hard for them. Okay, empathize. I think I understand what you're going through. You know, it's not easy at the moment. If there's anything I can do, okay. And we can use this in life, okay. So it's a lovely, lovely way to interact with people, whether it's your husband, your wife, you know, your children, people that you work with. PACE is a lovely technique. So I hope that's helpful for you. The next thing I want us to do is think about connecting in a crisis. So when you're in this moment, okay, we're going to act in different ways. Okay, so when a child is reacting in a crisis, they're going to do it with actions and feelings. So what I'd like you to do for me is in the question and answer box, I want you to think about what actions your child displays when they're in a sudden crisis. So whether that's a panic before the day, like in the days before, or a panic when they get the results, how will you know through an action that your child is in crisis? And I'm going to give you a few seconds to do that. And how do you think your child will be feeling in these circumstances? Frightened, nervous, scared. Yeah. Confused, not in control. What we need to remember is that the behaviours that your child is displaying with their actions and their feelings is it's like a language. They're trying to tell you that they're not doing okay. Yeah. Now moving on to the next slide. Okay, we can do something about that. Okay, it's vital that when we see these behaviors and actions, we don't see, think, and act, which is our first response. We can control our first response. We can sit on it. Okay, so we see, we think they're acting badly, and we act by saying, go to your room. Okay, we can kind of sit on that, and instead we hear what they're saying, we feel, so the empathic side of things, and then we respond by being supportive. Okay, and by doing this, it's going to regulate our child quicker, and they're going to come out of those actions and those feelings a lot quicker, and actually moving forward into the future, because you've got your child for the rest of your life. Okay, that's going to build a trust up between you. Okay, so this will build a beautiful bond for the rest of your life. Okay, so moving on to another slide. Okay, another thing to consider is black and white thinking. Now, we all do this, whether you're a child or a parent. So your child at the moment, okay, or when they get their results, they're either going to think, I'm a failure and I'm never going to get a good job, or they're going to be they'll be thinking, if they get a really, really good result, I'm a genius and I'm going to be an astrophysicist. And it could be that, if they get a bad result, you're thinking my child is going to live at home forever. Okay. Or you might think my child's going to be the best neurosurgeon in the country. Okay. We're gonna go from one side to the other. But what we've got to remember is that there's grey areas. Okay. And it's important to remind ourselves and our children that there's so many possibilities between it. Okay. So it's very, very unlikely that any of these scenarios are going to happen. Okay, so on to the next slide, we can have a little look at these grey areas and what could come up. So, that we won't let grades define us. We've seen in the quiz, they haven't defined us, we're doing okay. Okay, that, if they don't do very well, they can do resits, etc., etc. So think with your child when they're having these black thoughts, I'm not going to do well, if I do really badly. Okay, so if you don't do as well, what are we going to do about it? Let's look at the grey area, okay? And remind yourself of that as well, okay? That you're going to get these thoughts, but think about the grey areas, because actually it makes you feel more in control, okay? Now I'm going to pass over to Nicola, okay? And we're going to think about, what to do and how to react. Over to you, Nicola.
Thank you, Nadine. Yes, so it's just thinking about ourselves as well, remembering that it's not just our children that can feel overwhelmed and out of control. We can too. And just think about yourself, how you react when you're in that situation. We can all react very quickly without thinking first. So why do we have this kind of reaction? What is going on, in our brains and physically during that time? So if we pop onto the next slide, please, Mark. Then we've actually got three parts to our brains. So we have the survival part of our brain, the emotional brain, and our neocortex, as you can see on the slide there. Now, what happens when we become anxious or unsure, or in fact, sometimes very angry or very frightened? We go into what we call fight, flight, or freeze. And at that very point, it's actually not necessary to worry about our emotions or to worry about our thoughts. If a bear comes into the room right now, it's not going to do us much good to think, oh, I wonder why the bear's here. Look at his really sharp claws. Look at his big teeth. Isn't that fascinating? Actually, at the time, we've got to keep ourselves safe. Okay, so it's all about, what we do next. So we go into the survival part of our brain. So at this point, we've got some choices. We can fight the bear, we can run away from the bear, or in fact, what we can do is freeze and play dead. And so you might actually, if you think about your own reactions or look at your children's reactions to things when they are anxious or worried, you might notice that they are doing one of those things, not necessarily directed in the right place, but they may well be yelling and fighting and screaming. They might actually be running away and not wanting to talk about it at all, or they might just freeze and not know what to do at all. And we're going to show you a useful YouTube clip on this that you can actually share with your teens afterwards, because it's quite good for them to know what is going on in their body when things like this happen.
You know what anxiety feels like. We all do. Everyone experiences anxiety in some way or another. It's something that connects all of us together. Why we feel anxiety and what it really is, that may surprise you. Without anxiety, we'd all be in serious trouble. As soon as your brain senses you're in danger, a little piece of it, called the amygdala, kicks in. It gets your body ready to react. That could mean fight, run away, or shut down. It's called the fight, flight, or freeze response. This reaction goes back millions of years to our distant animal ancestors. Animals whose amygdalae were more sensitive to danger were more likely to stay alive and off the menu. Over millions of generations, this developed into the system we all know as anxiety. So you see, anxiety itself is not all bad. But when there's no immediate life or death threat, and your amygdala keeps telling your body that you're in danger, that's when anxiety becomes a problem. Your amygdala doesn't know the difference between getting eaten and public speaking or failing a test. Human society has only existed for a relatively short time. It's messy and complicated and confusing, and our amygdalae just haven't had time to catch up. So sometimes, when we're in uncomfortable situations, our brains misread the risk and overreact. Our hearts beat faster and we breathe heavily, pulling more oxygen into our bodies. The muscles in our arms and legs tense up and fill with blood. Our skin perspires to cool us down. This would all be great if we needed to fight or run, but instead, we just feel tense and sweaty. Sometimes our minds go blank and we feel like we can't move or talk. That would be great if we needed to hide. Instead, we just feel stuck. When things trigger our anxiety, sometimes we try to avoid them, like our ancestors avoiding a predator. But that can cause problems when those triggers are important parts of life, like going to school or meeting new people, things that won't just give up and go away. So how does knowing all this help? Well, it starts with remembering what's really going on. There's nothing physically wrong with you. It's just your amygdala trying to tell you it thinks you're in danger, even if it gets confused about how much danger you're really in. Understanding why we feel anxiety is an important step in learning to manage it.
So I hope you found that helpful. It's very, very natural for us to feel anxious at these big moments, and actually talking to our children about, what's going on in their bodies, like, do they have butterflies? Well, we can get butterflies when we're nervous, but we can get butterflies when we're anxious as well. So it's actually bearing in mind just to say to them that everybody feels like this is normal and it's okay. I think it's very reassuring for children to know that. The other thing is thinking about when they are feeling secure. Like Nadine said earlier, often it is by actions and thoughts. And so it's thinking about how they're communicating to us about how they're feeling. So that could be in a verbal way. So it might be in a very direct way. I'm so angry with you, I feel like I want to hurt you. That's very clear, very direct. But sometimes it can be indirect. They're not able to express exactly how they're feeling. So they might turn around and say somebody's ugly or stupid, as an example. It can be non-verbal as well. So look at their body language, see what's going on for them. So you might get the angry face, turning away from you, crossing their arms, hunching their shoulders, that kind of thing. Or actually they may even act out and they might actually, hurt other people, damage property, that kind of thing. So just bear in mind that they might be showing you through their behaviour how they're feeling without being able to express it. So us being aware of those feelings and maybe being able to name them or talk to them about it. So yes, we've got a question there about explain the difference between real danger and imagined danger. Actually, what I would say is your child's fear is real, no matter what that fear is. It doesn't have to be, an animal coming to eat them. Okay. It's being unsure of what's going to happen next. So anytime you're unsure, you're going to worry. If I'm going to go somewhere new, what do? I prepare in advance. I make sure that I know where I'm going, where on the map. I might even look to see where the toilets are in the place I'm going, all sorts of things. So it's about preparing. So what I would say, Kerry, is when you're talking to your child, see what their fears are, what their anxieties are, and accept them as real for them, even if they don't seem real to us. It's like with a 2-year-old saying you've given them the wrong cup and it's terrible because they've got the red cup instead of the blue cup and it's the end of the world for them. For us, it's a cup. What does it matter? But for your child, that danger, that worry is very real for them. So it's about actually talking about what that is specifically. And I'm going to go on to that a little bit later in the webinar about talking what specifically is the problem and what we can do to be prepared to actually, confront whatever that situation is. I hope that helps a bit. So we will come on to a bit more in a minute. So the next thing actually is thinking about ourselves as well. Because we as parents, we might go into the fight or flight. We might be really worried about what's going to happen. And in fact, if we're in fight or flight and our children are in fight or flight, I'm sure you've experienced this lots of times, you go into a cycle where you're talking and you're going round and round and round and round and nobody's getting anywhere. We're all saying things we don't mean. And it's really, really not helpful overall. So actually thinking about looking after yourself and keeping yourself calm is really a good way of dealing with it. Because if your child is anxious and you can be calm, you can be their rock, you can be consistent, that actually enables them to calm down a lot quicker. So think about yourself, what keeps you calm? Is it breathing exercises? Is it if you go for a run earlier in the day, does that burn off some of your energy? Think about how you look after yourself. So it might be that you read a book, you have a cup of tea, whatever it might be. Be prepared to think about that beforehand. So in these next 2 weeks coming up, give yourself some time to actually, process your own feelings. Think about how you're feeling. Maybe talk to somebody about them, maybe write it down, but process how you're feeling so that you're able to be calm on the day. Then again, worrying, how am I going to cope with my child's feelings? The main thing with that actually is for you to be calm, to remember all we've said before. We don't have to fix everything. It's natural as a parent, isn't it? We want to go in and we want to fix everything straight away. We can't always do that. Life happens, as I've said, but what we can do is we can listen. We can accept their feelings as they are, and we can show them that we're on their side, that we're, with them, we're behind them 100%. So, and then what do we do now might be the next question. So we might be thinking about, what are the options in the future so that we have thought about this beforehand. So we're not in the same kind of panic as our child might be when they get their results. So if we go on to the next slide, as I've just said to you, the importance of self-care is essential. It's like when you're on the airplane, isn't it? They always say to you, put your oxygen mask on first before you try and help other people. And it's natural as us, as a parent, to want to make everything right, to fix it all, as I've said. But actually, if we're not in a good place, it's very difficult for us to think logically. Like I've said, if you're in fight or flight, you don't need that logical part of your brain. So it's shut down. All you're thinking about is the survival. So actually keeping yourself calm is important. So, if you like swimming, going for a run, just having 5 minutes out for a cup of tea sometimes, maybe getting someone to look after the kids for a little bit so that, the rest of them, so you've got a bit of time for you. Making sure you look after yourself is the best way of actually preparing for your child's results, because then you can be calm at the time. If we go on to the next slide, there are some downloads that will be available afterwards. Some children find it really, really hard to express how they feel. They find it hard to even name the emotions or to know what to do with them. So things like the feelings wheel, you can see there, or the stress bucket, or a feelings thermometer can be really useful for us to actually talk to our children about our own emotions, about how we're feeling, but also about theirs, so that we can begin to talk about, what's going on for you. How are you feeling right now? And then it's when we look at the thermometer, you can see it's kind of going there between heated and very angry. What can we do to actually calm ourselves down? So it's thinking about, how we can bring ourselves down into the next level. So everybody's different with this. You told me to go out for a run. I would absolutely hate every minute of it. Hate running, can't stand it. Hurts my knees. I'd have had enough in a few seconds. Go swimming is great. I love going swimming. I can swim all day. You can get into my own headspace and it's really good. I love things like arts and crafts. In fact, I sit there with my grandchildren. We do Play-Doh, things like that. It's actually really calming to do it yourself. Some people like, making bread, really kneading that dough. Some people like walks in nature. So have a think about how you self-regulate. What makes you feel better? And then think about your children, because as I said, we will all be very, very different with this. Every child is different. Every person is different. How is it, what can they do? Can they go and read a book for a bit? Can they go on their iPad, tablet a bit? I know sometimes tech is not thought of as the most brilliant thing, but actually it can be used to regulate. Watching a program on TV that's a bit of a trashy program. So what? Sometimes we need to self-regulate. So it's actually thinking about what works for each member of your family, and then maybe supplying them with materials so that they can do that. Give them that time and space to regulate before you then tackle a major problem that's gone on. Okay, so I'm going to pass you back to Nadine now. She's going to be talking a bit more about how we can control our thoughts, etc. If you go, Nadine.
Yeah, so I won't stay too long on this because I'm aware that we've only got like 15 minutes left. But a really nice tool that we use in therapy is the CBT triangle. So I'll give you a really quick example, but if you wanted to look further into it, you can kind of go on Google and literally Google in CBT triangle and it'll explain how to do it. But let's have a scenario that your child opens their GCSE results and they don't do as well as they thought. Okay, so their initial thought will be obviously disappointment, but I won't be able to get into the college that I wanted to get into now. Okay, I won't be able to be a doctor. I won't be able to do this, that. Okay, so that's like the initial thought. The feeling will be disappointment, sadness, maybe even grief because they've given up so much time and then it hasn't paid off. And the action may be to close down, to rebel, to say, right, that's it, I'm done, I'm not doing anything. And it can be quite a drastic action. And it'll just go round and round and round in circles, okay? And it'll be a bit like a snowball effect where the thoughts will get worse, the feelings will get worse, and the actions will get worse. However, the theory is that if you take one of these out and you change it, okay, it'll change everything else. So if they change their feelings for relief because the GCSEs are over, okay, it takes a sting out of it a little bit, okay? And then the action might be, okay, well, I'm just going to give myself a bit of a break. And then their thoughts will have more clarity. Or if they change their thought to, okay, let's have a little look and see what I can do instead, then the feeling again will be relief and the action will be that they're seeking what they can do instead. So I hope that makes sense. And as I say, you can do that for yourself as well, but look into it because it is actually a really, really interesting tool to use. I'm going to pass you back over to Nicola because she'll talk a little bit more about thoughts and feelings and how they can impact people.
Yeah, so quite often we find that, with teens or even perhaps with ourselves, we do tend to dwell on things. But in fact, if we just dwell on it, nothing will change, and we can get very miserable, very depressed very quickly. So think about those thoughts, can we change the situation? Can we move on from whatever's happened? And I would say as well, choosing to do nothing is still a choice, but actually if we work on it now, we can change things for the future. As we've said earlier, it doesn't need to be black and white thinking. There are options for the future, The glass can be half full as well as half empty. So, can we look at the positives within that situation? Catastrophizing, if any of you have neurodiverse children, you'll be very, very familiar with this one. It does seem like it's the end of the world, but remind them that actually it isn't. It will feel like that right then, particularly if all their friends have done really well and they haven't, or their friends going to the uni they wanted to and not the other one. But it isn't the end of the world. Things can change, things can get better, and think about your own experience with that. We can see from the polls earlier that, it isn't the end of the world at all. Negative self-labeling. Don't let them sit there and say, I am useless, I am stupid, I am dumb. Actually, we need a more realistic view, because actually, I'm sure there are some positives within those results. They must have done something well. And if it's not within the results, well, maybe they're a really good person, really a kind person, a loving person, a helpful person. Also, that word should. I hate that word should. Who says you should? Who is this person? Actually, let's think about that. We don't have to do anything. Let's choose to do what we do. Also, it's okay to make a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes and we can learn from them. And actually, do you know what? If we didn't revise and we didn't do very well, maybe actually we didn't have to with a lot of the tests when we were younger, but actually these ones we did. Some people do that with their GCSEs. They can pass them easily. When it gets to A-levels, no, they can't. And they get a bit of a shock, actually. Okay, if they've made a mistake, we can move on from that as well. The other some reminders that I just want to go through on the next slide, please, Mark. So it's really about us being there for our child, because they might be thinking, like on here, the positive mindset, I can never be a vet now. Or actually, we can achieve something else. So think about their mindset. Think about what we can actually say to them that is positive, that is more realistic. And if we go on to the next slide, just remind us from what we've talked about, listen to what they're actually saying. Okay. Acknowledge how they feel. Their feelings are real for them, even if we don't understand them. Okay. Support them in what they want to do. The main thing is that we are there to support them. That's what we can do for them as parents, and just telling them that actually we love them as they are. And then we can go into solution building, which we'll go into in just a moment. So if we can go on to the next slide, Mark. So remember about keeping your bond before we do that. Tell your child about the positive characteristics they've got. Point out when they show a characteristic that you approve of, so by saying something like, you're so kind to share with your sister, you were so helpful when you helped do the shoelaces, whatever it is. Point out their good points, their good qualities. And sometimes you might have to look hard for those, particularly if they're going through a rough time and they're really grumpy. But try and spot those good moments, even if they just close the door quietly once, point it out. Thank you for being considerate and closing the door quietly, Let them know if they've got any gifts or talents. Remind them as well that those talents don't all have to be about education. They might be great at football. They might be great at ballet, dancing, whatever that, whatever it is they like. They might be great at telling jokes, putting on magic shows. Everybody's different, but point out, the good things that they can do. And encourage them in the interest that they have got, support them in that. We know that you might not be interested in them per se, but you're interested because you're interested in your child, and that will make a difference. So go along with, what they're interested in too. Okay, so I'm just going to pass you back to Nadine because she'd like to talk about a gratitude journal now.
Okay, so this is something that I absolutely swear by, and you don't have to do it religiously every day. People think that journals and diaries need to be filled out every day, and they really, really don't. But a gratitude journal is a little bit different to normal journaling, and this is just recognizing what you've been grateful for, like, that day or that week. Okay, so, what's gone well, what's good about you. You can buy gratitude journals on Amazon, The Works, WH Smith. You can make your own. We've got one here that's downloadable towards the end. do one for yourself. Like you are literally going to be hammered by your child over the next couple of weeks with insults and all sorts. So, sometimes you'll need to, remember what you're grateful for as well. But it's also really helpful for a child, like, if they're getting nervous, or actually, as well, like if they do really well and they smash their A levels and they decide to go off to university, you might get empty nest, or, your child might feel really homesick. So having a gratitude journal to remember all of those good things are fantastic. And we always kind of have them in my home. One of my children hates them and she just doesn't see the point, and the other one absolutely loves them. So, it's a very individual thing, but a gratitude journal I would recommend. And also, just to add, you might just have to prompt them and encourage them at first to, to find them good things, because we're kind of told as individuals that we shouldn't see our good points for whatever reason. But that's a webinar for another day. So I'm going to pass you back over to Nicola with a nice little inspirational quote.
And I think this is the really most important point we can say to our children. It is one step at a time. I think even as adults, we try and run before we can walk, don't we? We're worried about the next thing. But actually, let's just sit where we are now for a minute and work out what we can do, one thing at a time. So we're going to have a look at problem solving now, or solution building. So actually be really specific with your child. What is actually the problem? Was it just that they didn't get one grade right? Is it because they can't go to one university? What actually is that problem? Break it down, because it is not the end of the world. Everything hasn't gone wrong. Certain things have. So be very, very specific. Acknowledge how they're feeling about that. How do they feel? How do we feel? I mean, they might be saying, oh, but you'll be really disappointed in me now. They might be worried about your feelings. So, have that conversation with them. You can say, well, I'm disappointed for you, but I'm not disappointed in you, because I love you for who you are. But set a goal. So the next thing is to set a goal for the future, and to think about what we can do and get them to come up with ideas as well. What can we do? What can the goal be? Do we need to ask someone else for some suggestions? Do we need any more information at all? And if we go on to the next slide, please, Mark. We might then think about, what are the consequences of those choices? What would happen if you didn't go to university? What would happen if you did an apprentice instead? So actually talk about that. Talk about the long-term, short-term consequences of that. But bear in mind your own journey through your career as well. Then we make a decision and think, is it a workable decision? Is it a fair decision? Can we stick to it? What steps do I need to actually carry out that decision? Do I need any more information? Do I need to practice any steps? If they do need to ask someone for help, have they got the words to say? Do they need to practice with you? How to make that telephone call, how to contact that person, and then make a goal as to when you're going to complete each step. So it all comes down to then, how do I move forward one step at a time? So before we get to that stage, I would recommend, please have a look. We can't actually go into specifics here because we're all, you're all from different areas in the country, but have a look, who do we speak to at the school or college if there is a problem? How do we get hold of clearance? Be prepared for it. Think about what support, assistance and guidance you can have. Think about as well, also, are there some people that your children can talk to if they don't want to talk to you? Is there a grandparent, an auntie, a friend of the family, maybe a leader of scouts or something else that they might be involved in that they could actually chat to? Remind them that it hasn't only got to be down to them, that there are other people that, may be able to help in their lives as well. No, that was very quick whistle stop tour through everything. So I hope it does make sense. Have a think about it. And as I said, you can get in touch with us afterwards, but can we just do one more word cloud now, please? So it's kind of what word or phrase comes to mind now when you think about exam day? Has it changed at all since, we've been chatting to you?
So I think we'll just finish by saying thank you so much for being on this webinar.
So thank you very much for coming. It just shows how, keen you are to support your children in the best way you can. So well done for that, everybody. And yeah, it's been great to hopefully be helpful to you. Thank you very much.